Hey, what is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Mile Higher Podcast. As you can probably tell, my lovely wife and co-host is sadly not here today. She came down with something last night, and it is pretty gnarly. So I told her, I was like, you know what? Let me just take one for the team, and I got this covered. So she is home resting. She's doing well. She'll be back next week. But today, you're left with me, and I've got a very, there's not even words to describe this guy other than maybe dumb or genius, depending on who you are. Because we're going to be discussing potentially the world's smartest man, according to him, really. Because Christopher Langan is his name. Maybe you've come across him on YouTube. I'm trying to remember how I even came across him in the first place. I think he was interviewed on some YouTube channel that I follow that interviews a lot of very interesting guests, specifically around sort of ufology and metaphysics and things like that. And he was on there. I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Claiming that he's out to prove the existence of God and basically what reality is, and amongst a bunch of other ideas that he has. I mean, this guy is truly wild, and I think at the very least, you will find this episode very entertaining. What do you think, guys? Which Ian and Janelle are here. I'm not completely by myself.
Hey.
Sorry, guys.
What's up? No, it's okay.
Yeah, it's going to be entertaining. And honestly, it probably is going to annoy you because this guy, to be honest, listening to him is like, dude, he says a whole lot without saying a whole lot.
Yeah, if you hear him just by chance, you might be like, oh, it kind of sounds smart. But the more you dig into what he's saying, none of it makes sense. But then when you actually hear other, people who kind of understand physics and mathematics a little bit more, they're like, this guy, no idea what the fuck's going on here. So yeah, let's just get into it, because I think there's a lot to be said about this guy, and things definitely take a very sharp turn down the alt-right path.
Yeah, it's crazy how a lot of these IQ guys just, at a certain point, they decide, you know what? I'm going to become a racist.
Yep.
Which, when I listen to him, I'm like, man, that is so disappointing to hear. Because I feel like if he didn't go that path and he was a little bit more humble as well, he might be an actually interesting character that could contribute to society. And because he says a lot of things, too, that are very contradictory to some of his other stances. He talks about this oneness that all human beings share, and that we're all, part of this universal consciousness, and a lot of ideas that I tend to subscribe to when it comes to just explaining what our existence is, what is reality, and, is this a simulation, and all these different philosophical ideas. I'm like, oh, this is all very interesting. But then he has to go and say a bunch of really fucked up shit, and you're like, I just lost all respect for you, dude. And so therefore, I'm going to be dunking on you for the entirety of this episode, because it's just completely ridiculous and uncalled for and straight up offensive, as you'll see. But who is this man, Christopher Langan? Well, he's a self-proclaimed genius. So throughout history, we all know humankind has been blessed with minds of some real geniuses. There's tons of genius people. We've talked about a number of them on the show. And, for example, Isaac Newton developed the laws of motion without any modern ways to measure it. Pretty impressive. It still blows my mind how he even figured this out in the first place. You got Leonardo da Vinci, created models of what would become contemporary means of flight. Einstein, we all know what Einstein did. Very smart guy, right? Was able to quantify gravity and relativity through the use of mathematics. I mean, amongst a million other things that he did. Just a really, really smart guy. Christopher Langan, whole other tier though, as you'll see here in a moment. Marie Curie, who changed her understanding of radioactivity and died for it. Sir John Harington invented the modern flushing toilet in 1529. Although this was misattributed, right, Ian?
Yep. In researching this, there were numerous articles that said that it was invented by Thomas Crapper, which is
That's so awesome.
Thomas Crapper.
Mr. Thomas Crapper.
Is that a real person?
Yeah, he was a real guy. He didn't do anything.
But because his last name was Crapper, he got the kudos for the flushing toilet.
For the flushing toilet, yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Mr. Crapper.
That's kind of a cool last name, honestly.
I would love to...
Ian Crapper.
Ian shit. That would be awesome.
Ian Shitter.
Yeah.
Well, dozens of geniuses have fundamentally changed our understanding of the world around us, and a select few have even developed working theories of everything that use mathematics and physics and science to describe the nature of our reality, our consciousness, and our universe. Einstein's theory of relativity is one of the most well-known, along with Stephen Hawking's imaginary time. But the only question is, how high were their IQs? They're pretty high. They're pretty high. Albert Einstein, IQ of 160. Stephen Hawking, IQ of 160. Christopher Langan, higher than that, as we'll see. But IQ testing is a big part of really how Christopher Langan is able to even claim that he's a genius. It's really the only reason he's able to claim this. Which, let's talk about IQ testing for a moment, because I think it's not something that is really used at all these days. You have to seek out an IQ test. You're not ever offered one or given one at any institution that I'm aware of. But IQ testing rose to prominence in the 80s and 90s to measure intellectual capability through a series of logic puzzles to determine just how smart a person is. It's important to note that while none of the individuals we just listed ever took an IQ test during their lifetimes, all of them have been determined by those obsessed with IQ. So keep that in mind. So 160 for Einstein and Hawking. This is based on other people's analysis of their abilities and their knowledge. But what if there was a guy among us who has the highest measured IQ in the world and a working metaphysical theory of everything? He can explain everything.
Everything.
It's a tall order. And he's got a big head. He's very proud of his cranial circumference. He claims he has he makes this whole argument of the bigger the head, the larger the brain, right? And the larger the brain equals more intelligence, which I think is debated. But what if this guy, who knows everything, wasn't a respected academic, but a former bouncer and current horse farmer in Missouri? Would you believe me? What if he believed in God and his own form of science in equal measure, and a few other more unsavory theories about the earth? Well, enter Christopher Michael Langan, who at the age of 73 still claims to be the smartest man in the world with a reported IQ of between 195 and 210. Chris beats the estimated IQs of Beethoven, Da Vinci, and Descartes by a country mile. So before I go any further, I feel like you need to hear a little bit from the man himself, because it'll just help everything be that much more entertaining, especially when we get into his life story, which definitely has a lot of ups and downs. So here's a little snippet of Chris talking about his IQ.
My IQ would be somewhere between 190 and 210.
210 seems very, very, very high.
Does seem that way, doesn't it? Albert Einstein was estimated at between 180 and 190. Charles Darwin is way down there in the toilet at 135.
Trash.
Are you a genius?
Well, you're kind of putting me on the spot here, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're forcing me to either say no, in which case, it's all hype, or you're forcing me to say yes. I'll say probably yes, I am a genius by most of the criteria. The definitive criteria of genius, I think you'd have to consider me a genius, yeah.
You'd have to consider me a genius.
He could have just said yes.
Yeah.
He could have saved us the 30 seconds of babbling, trying to circumvent the question. That's the thing. He does a lot of talking.
Mm-hmm.
He just talks at you. And he does it in this emotionless sort of calm. He's very calm through most of his interviews. And I think it's on purpose.
I think
He doesn't want to have an emotional response, even though he's clearly annoyed he's being asked this. He tries to answer it and then also like point out, oh, well, you're trying to do this or that. We love it. We love it. So he spent 30 years, which he dedicated most of that time to what he calls the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, or CTMU, as he calls it, which is the only theory of everything that goes past physical science to explain the nature of existence itself, which I got no issue with that. If you want to theorize about the nature of existence, go for it. But if you're going to go further than that, you should probably think about how you're going to do that. So there's numerous interviews with Chris over the years, including 2 chapters dedicated to him in the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, who we'll talk about more later on. But his theories have always come under fire for being less than scientific, and his personal views have aligned him with the far right and fringe conspiracies about the New World Order, of course. So who is Christopher Langan? Is he just a misunderstood genius just really trying to help the world? Or is he a conspiracy crackpot? Or just a good old-fashioned racist? I mean, by the end of it, there's only one solution. I'll just let you know right now. Is it a combo of all 3?
Maybe a combo of 2. Maybe a combo of 2.
The latter.
In order to understand the man, we got to go all the way back to the beginning because his life story is very interesting, especially since it all comes from him. So Chris was born on March 25th, 1952 in San Francisco, and he was raised by his mother, Mary Langan Hansen. Mary was the daughter of a wealthy shipping executive who was cut off from her family at the young age for having a, quote, spirited lifestyle. She was known for hanging out at the famous City Lights bookstore and was friends with members of the Beat Poets. Chris never knew his biological father. Mary would tell him that his dad had died of a heart attack before he was born, but Chris doesn't believe this story is the truth. It is also rumored that he skipped town before Chris was born and would later die in Mexico. But Chris's mother would marry 3 more times and had a son with each of them. The second husband was murdered, the third killed himself, and the fourth, Jack Langan, would be Chris's stepfather. Chris described Jack as a, quote, failed journalist and a heavy drinker who used a bullwhip to discipline Chris and his siblings. That is a very, very intense punishment. A bullwhip?
Yeah, pretty vicious. Pretty vicious.
That's if that really happened, that is horrible.
Evil.
Very evil. With Jack at the helm of the family, they moved around quite a bit. After leaving San Francisco, they spent some time living in a teepee on a reservation and later in Virginia City, Nevada, before finally settling in Bozeman, Montana, where Chris spent most of his childhood. And almost all of Chris's stories about his early life come from the man himself, as I mentioned, and as you'll notice later, he has a very active imagination. I mean, he's so smart, you would expect a genius to have a very active imagination, right? So as we go forward, take all the information we're about to tell you with a very healthy grain of salt, because who really fucking knows what's true and what's not. But Chris said that the family lived in, quote, abject poverty, and that Jack would often lock the kitchen cabinets so the boys couldn't access the food within, which is very sad. And he said that Jack, quote, figured the best way to raise 3 boys would be to set up his own military platoon. Very intense. Living with him was like 10 years of boot camp, according to Chris, and only at boot camp, you don't get the shit beaten out of you every day with a garrison belt. At 6 a.m, Jack would play the bugle and line up Chris and his brothers to stand at attention. He would then walk up to each of them and just punch them.
Well, he would feign a punch.
Feign a punch, right.
But if they flinched, then he'd punch them.
Great parenting.
Yeah.
Definitely a great way to get your boys to fall in line here. Again, according to Chris, while his stepfather treated him roughly, he started showing early signs of his intelligence from a very, very young age. He said he started talking at 6 months, which is impossible.
He talks about how he saw red shoes with a buckle, and he was like, buckle.
No. I recently had a 6-month-old, and there is no way a 6-month-old is speaking anything. They're making noises, maybe. But I'm pretty sure, I looked into this a little bit yesterday, that from a medical perspective, the mouth's not even formed to the point that it could actually enunciate words at that. So there you go. Speaking at 6 months old, and he could read by age 3, which to me is not entirely out of the realm of possibility. I think it is possible. My daughter's able to memorize pages of books based on just hearing us read them over and over again. It's more of a comprehension thing, as opposed, she's not reading it word for word or following the words, but she can remember what the book's about and pretty much line by line kind of give you her version of it. So could he read by 3? Maybe. At age 5, he asked his grandfather about the existence of God. And apparently at 5, he was very disappointed with the answers. Can you imagine?
So fun. Like, Grandpa, that's not good enough for me.
You don't know shit, Grandpa.
Yeah, shut up, Grandpa.
Man, I thought Grandpa was so smart. He doesn't know anything. He also skipped kindergarten through 2nd grade and started properly going to school in 3rd grade. Chris said, quote, "It was simply recognized that I was some kind of kid genius. My schoolmates saw me as the teacher's pet, this little freak. Between the bullying at school and abuse from his stepfather, Chris decided he needed to get strong, get swole, baby. By the time he was 12, Chris had started lifting weights. Chris said, quote, "When you're the littlest and the smartest and you're wearing rags and you come to school with a fat lip and all these marks on you, you're treated like scum by the rest of the kids. I developed my strength, worked on my hand speed, and learned how to beat up kids that were twice my size. So now he's a kung fu master."
He's a genius. He's a kung fu master. I bet he's a good cook, too.
Well, I mean, if you're reading by age 3, you should be able to, by 3rd grade, I mean, he's reading he could read whatever he wants. Just go check out some books at the library on kung fu, and he could teach himself anything. Very impressive. Very impressive. Do you want to get your financial IQ score up? Well, you don't need to take an IQ test like our pal here today, but let me tell you, one way to get your money to rocket to the top is by using the Rocket Money app. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel those pesky unwanted subscriptions. It also monitors your spending, and it does it really well, and it helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings and your financial IQ score. So many reasons why I love Rocket Money. I use it every day. I pay for the premium version of it because I love it that much, and it provides so much value to me and saves me so much time and headaches from having to scan through financial statements and bank statements. I don't even have to log into my banks very often because I just pop into Rocket Money and I can see my whole dashboard. I can see what I've spent, bills coming out. It even tells, what's also a nice feature that doesn't get mentioned a lot is the fact it tells you when refunds come through. You know, especially if you share a bank account with somebody, you can keep tabs on each other, see when, you know, those items that your wife purchased that are laying around the house for a while actually get returned and you get a refund for it. It's great. I love it. You'll love it. There's so many reasons why you should be using Rocket Money to, you know, help your financial situation. Just get your life organized. The bill feature is probably one of the coolest things. The ability to submit a bill, like your utilities bill, your internet bill, and let Rocket Money try to negotiate a lower rate for you. That's awesome. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. So what are you doing? Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/milehigher today. That's rocketmoney.com/milehigher today. rocketmoney.com/milehigher today. Chris also said that in high school, he was mainly doing independent study as, quote, "they didn't know what to teach me." Can you imagine?
The teacher's like, "God, you're just so smart. I don't know what to teach you."
Well, it's like the whole time I'm hearing these things, I'm like, I went to school with a lot of very, very intelligent people, kids that were way more intelligent than I was. And they did not fucking act like this at all. Like these kid prodigies, they exist, but they are so far and few between. And again, at different time when he grew up, different locations. I don't want to compare his upbringing to anybody else's, because again, according to him, he grew up very impoverished, abusive relationship with his, stepfather. And so that makes things really hard. But had he been in a different environment with different parents, maybe it'd been different altogether. I mean, his whole entire life could be different, but it's hard not to laugh at some of the things that he says.
Well, yeah, because it's very, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn style. Like, oh, I got them to paint the fences for me. It's so ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Well, we all knew smart kids. Were any of them like, you don't know what to teach me? I'll be in the library reading all the books.
Right.
No, dude. But maybe his school just didn't have the resources. Maybe they just didn't have, he ran out of curriculum for him. And so they're like, all right, go to the library, do self-study.
But apparently, at the school where he was doing self-study in the library, they still had books on advanced math and physics. Curious. That's curious.
It's very curious. How advanced? How advanced are we talking? Are these just like textbooks? Or are he's reading, Einstein's literature?
Right.
Because he said he was studying advanced math, physics, philosophy, Latin, and Greek, which that's damn. Latin and Greek? One of those by themselves is hard enough, but no. Chris was doing both. Chris also said that while he was spending all day in study hall, parents began taking their kids out of study hall because, quote, they thought I was going to beat them up. So who became the bully then? It's just, what do you believe? I mean, it's hard to understand the version of events that he's given us. But while Chris intimidated the children at school, his stepfather was still finding any excuse to hurt him while at home. One morning when Chris was 14, he awoke to a flash of white light and pain across his eyes. Jack had come home after drinking all night, wrapped the belt around his hand, and just punched Chris in the eye. According to Chris, he went apeshit. Chris flew at Jack, knocked him down across the room, punched him against the wall, and threw him out the door. He continued to beat the now elderly man in their front yard and told him to never return. Damn. While Jack decided that was probably the best case scenario for him, he never came back. But Chris was looking at how to continue his education in college. According to him, Chris had received a perfect score on the SAT, despite having time to take a nap during the test. Is this believable at all?
No, man. No.
Dude, what?
It's just, it's funny. It's hilarious to me.
Sounds like you just fucking filled in a bunch of bubbles and they were like, this is stupid.
Fuck you.
Well, because he talks about later on how standardized tests are, basically a bunch of bullshit. So maybe he was already thinking that then and he just like filled in. He's like, it doesn't matter. I'll just tell people I got a perfect score.
Yeah, it's all good.
Because here's the thing with Chris, as far as I know, and Ian, you can back me up on this. Is there any proof or evidence of any of these claims?
No.
Also, approximately 0.07% of students get a perfect SAT score. That's roughly 7 out of every 10,000 students.
0.07. How about
he was napping?
How about add a nap to it?
That's right.
That's 0.00, just 0. 0%. Doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he was offered 2 full-ride scholarships, one to Reed College in Oregon and the other to the University of Chicago. And Chris decided on Reed, which he would later say was, quote, a big mistake, as he wasn't used to a more city-like environment because a country boy can't survive in the city, man.
I can attest there were some country boys who went to my college and like for real they were quite overwhelmed by just like going from living on a farm to then immediately living in New York. Now I know that doesn't go for everybody, but I think there is something to be said about living in a rural community for most of your life and then jumping into a larger city.
What city is Reed in though?
Oregon.
I believe it's not even that big of a city. Let me check.
It says, Reed College is...
Because I could understand New York City, but even if you grew up in the country and go to school and...
It's out in Portland.
Oh, yeah. All right, man. Baby stuff.
Yeah, this is nothing. Portland versus NYC, big difference. Again, when you're living out in the sticks like he was, it's a... No, he also claims he didn't have like... I might be confusing him with someone else. Didn't he say he didn't have like electricity?
No, you're thinking of Mr. Nygaard.
Oh,
yeah.
The shows are blending together. Oh, yes, that was Nygaard.
Also a liar about his upbringing.
Yes,
and not a fucking goat.
Yeah,
no,
piece of trash.
My bad.
A literal evil piece of shit. Anyways, so he was like, big mistake. I'm not used to this. I'm used to just. I think what happens is, some country place can be a little lawless, be a little things that you can get by with in the country is very different in a city. And that's saying somebody who grew up in the country as well and went to school in the city. Very different. But he claimed he excelled in his first semester. He earned all A's, of course. His mother had forgotten to send in financial paperwork, and so his scholarship just was suspended, which if you're so smart, you'd think you'd be on top of that, but apparently not. So he dropped out at the end of his second semester and he earned all F's. Chris took some time off from school and returned to Bozeman, Montana, and worked as a Forest Service firefighter for 18 months before he decided to return to school, this time enrolling at Montana State University in Bozeman. However, Chris continued to face bad luck while at school. His car broke down during the winter semester and he had to walk 15 miles in the Montana winter to get to class.
Shut the fuck up, dude. 15 miles.
Uphill both ways.
In like
That's
6
right.
feet of snow.
Yeah.
Was he walking on the highway?
Right. It's just nonsensical.
So you walked 30 miles a day. Okay.
And you got to your class on time?
Yeah.
What time did you leave, bro?
Literally.
This is fucking Montana, too. But at this point, Chris was getting frustrated with his dumb professors because they don't know shit. He said, there I was, paying my own money, taking class from people who are obviously my intellectual inferiors. I could literally teach these people more than they could teach me. And on top of that, they have no understanding. I would love to talk to one of his old professors.
I don't think he had one. That's I don't think he had one.
Because this is just so unbelievable. But it gets even better. They don't want to help me out in the least. To this day, I have no respect for academics. I call them Acadummies.
Hell yeah, dude.
Man, what an insult to professors. I'm sure they're so offended. Acadummies. Well, school was not for Chris, man. So he's like, I'll just do what I'm good at.
Which, to be fair, many very intelligent people are not good at school.
Yeah, true.
You know, school doesn't really measure your intelligence. It more so measures your ability to like memorize and take tests. Or I guess measure like one piece of intelligence, I guess you could say. I don't know. But
sounds like Chris over there.
No, but I think you're right. I mean,
no, you're right. I'm just,
thanks.
I'm just joshing you over here.
I'm just joshing you.
No, but like, you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It's like, yeah, there's some people who are really good at school and also happen to be really smart. And then there's some people who are really smart and are fucking terrible at school. And it's not really a measure of your intelligence. Anyway, so.
No, I know.
It's a measure of your obedience.
Yeah, a lot of times. A lot of times.
I know, like, one of my best friends in the world, I think he's like a very, very smart guy. He went to like a prestigious university in DC and he dropped out after his first semester just because he couldn't do it. He just hated it. And I think, you know, to give Chris some grace here, if he did go to college in the first place, I don't see that as too nonsensical.
No, I don't either. And I think also just based on his other schooling history, he was not prepared for that change.
Right.
I mean, it's a pretty major change if you go to like a podunk country school and you're the smartest person in the building. And then you show up to university and it's like, oh, okay. The gap isn't quite as big despite what he's saying. And I think, and just it's rigorous. And most universities you got to be on top. It's time management skills too. It's like, you got to be able to manage your time. You got to be able to like juggle classes and show up for stuff. And there's like a lot of different components to it that honestly, most high schools don't do a great job of preparing you for it, but at least in some ways it does with the way that the classes are structured, off periods, all this different stuff. And, you know, so I think some of it could have been just, he had no experience or had no idea what to expect. He got there, he wasn't able to kind of fit into the college lifestyle and then use the excuse of, well, I could teach everybody here these courses better than they can. This is a waste of time, so I'm out. But doesn't mean he's a dummy per se.
That at least. Dummy, but
yes.
Other things.
Yes. So, you know, he's a big swole dude. I mean, he's lifting weights since 12. Doesn't stop. Protein every morning. So he's at least got the muscles going, you know?
I think there was one interview with him where they described him as like Chris and his 35-inch chest. Whoa.
He's measuring his bust?
He's busting. He's definitely doing that.
I think he was like kind of a weightlifter, like a kind of like took it a little bit competitively a little bit.
Well, yes, and he was a personal trainer as well. That's what he was doing in New York. So he took his fitness very, very seriously.
So he's also good on the physical level, not just the mental level. He's now got this physical superiority to everybody.
He's got a big chest and a big head.
Yeah.
Yes. And a little, we won't go there, but.
How do you know that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Chris Langan dropped the size.
But anyways, Chris went on to work a string of labor-intensive jobs throughout the years. He worked as a construction worker, cowboy, forest ranger, and farmhand before he eventually settled in Long Island as a bouncer and a bartender in New York City. So he ended up making his way he got tired of the country life, and he's like, this is boring. Tired of beating up cowboys and throwing cows around. Let's go make drinks. And also, I'm sure he's a little lonely, right? He wants to meet people, women. He's kind of in the prime. There's probably a lot more women to choose from in New York City than out there in Bozeman. So he headed off to the big city. Chris's life in the city is frequently talked about. He lived in a one-room cabin that overlooked a field of heavy machinery and parked his Harley in the kitchen. He would have a Harley, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
He's that kind of guy. Which, no hate on Harleys. Hate how loud they are, but they are cool. He survived off $6,000 a year, apparently, working as a personal trainer during the day and developed a double life strategy. Chris said, quote, "On one side, you're a regular guy. You go to work, you do your job, you exchange pleasantries. On the other side, you come home and you begin doing equations in your head. You kind of retreat into your own world and you make it work the best you can." That's a rough life. I'd be upset if I went home and started thinking about equations. I'd be pissed.
Turn this shit off.
I'd be like, someone hand me a joint, please.
No, literally.
I need to stop thinking about E equals MC squared and the meaning of our universe. However, lucky for Chris, his life was about to change thanks to the rise in the prominence of IQ testing. So what is important to note off the jump here is that high IQ tests above 150 are considered unreliable. And this is just how it is. They believe there is not enough of a difference between a score of 150 and 200 to justify ranking anyone higher. The Guinness Book of World Records used to list IQ scores. I remember as a kid getting the Guinness World Books of Records and seeing that in there, actually. I don't think I ever saw Chris in there, though.
No, his would have been I think it would have been the Guinness Book 1986.
Definitely was not alive for that. They actually stopped listing the highest IQ score in 1990 because people's scores higher than 150 are often unreliable. And so why give them, it's utterly meaningless to be in there then at that point. And Guinness World Book of Records is very legit, very meaningful records in there.
The longest
Very
fingernails.
Yes.
Don't ever forget her.
Dude, I used to love those books.
Me too, man.
They're so fun.
I remember there was the most downloaded image, I think, was a photo of Pamela Anderson in a bikini.
Aha.
And I like that page a lot.
Oh my God.
I like that page a lot.
And how old were you? 8?
I was 18. No, yeah, I was probably 8.
18?
No.
Well, because of this, specific tests have been engineered to test high IQ, like the Mega Test, which tests people with an IQ above 150. However, it's important to note that Mensa, the more or less authoritative group of high IQ individuals, does not accept Mega Tests for entry. The Mega Test has also been criticized for several reasons, including its short length, only 48 questions. An individual passes the test when they score 43 correctly. However, the test is designed only to be taken once, and the questions do not change with new attempts. What's the point of that?
Yeah, it's and this was unverified, but according to some sources, you could take the Mega Test by writing into an ad found in the back of a science fiction magazine. So it's,
Totally legit.
Totally legit.
So keep all that in mind when we talk about Christopher Langan taking the Mega Test in 1986 and scored 42. So unfortunately, he was one question shy of passing. So what happened next? Well, Chris refiled and retook the test using the pseudonym Eric Hart. He was too embarrassed. This time, surprise, surprise, Chris scored a whopping 47 out of 48, granting him the highest score on the test ever received and putting his IQ between the range of 195 to 200. So there you go. That's how we got there. Soaring high IQ.
He cheated. He cheated.
Got it on the second try. I think we all could do better on the second try.
I would hope so. That would be bad if he got a 41.
We got worse.
Yeah.
Questions don't change. You should be getting higher.
Yeah, the Mega Society and Mensa groups in general are very interesting. The people that show up to those. If you just go on Reddit and read about Mensa groups, it's just kind of hilarious to hear people's experiences and what people are like there. And there's definitely some similar people to Chris that kind of show up to some of these things, which is kind of interesting. But Chris continued to use the pseudonym Eric Hart in the Mega Society Research Group, which he was allowed to join after passing the test. He even used the name in the year's edition of the Guinness Book of World Records next to Keith Raniere of Nixium. Wow. What was Keith in there for? IQ?
High IQ.
Wow. That's not saying a whole lot. We're talking about Keith. Oh, man. So before we proceed with our discussion of Chris, it's important to note that his entire claim to fame as the smartest guy alive is based on just a bunch of bullshit, really. Kind of fraudulent. He has never taken another IQ test to verify his intelligence, which you'd think he'd want to do that, right? He knows he's being doubted. He knows people are dunking on him constantly. If you're really that smart, why is it that big of a deal to just take another test?
Right. Silence the haters.
That's
Or
right.
debate an actual smart person.
Right.
If you're so smart. But no, Chris, he doesn't have time for that, man. He's a very busy guy. However, his IQ is estimated to be somewhere between 120 and 130, which does make him more intelligent than most. It's above the average, which honestly seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I was watching a lot of Professor Dave, who he just debunks a lot of these kinds of guys. And he hates Christopher Langan. But even he was like, he said that. He was the one who said, like, I would put him between 120 and 130 because he is still very well spoken. And clearly he thinks in terms of logic. And that might not be facts, but it is in terms of logic. One thing leads to the next.
That logic doesn't seem to cross over to other areas of thought, though.
No.
Unfortunately.
No.
Who out there loves to eat? Me. I love food. And I love cooking food. But what I don't love is how long it takes to put a meal on the table sometimes. You know, in the past, I'd have to go to the grocery store, gather up all the ingredients, download the recipe, then come home, prepare everything, cook the food, put it on the table, eat it, then clean it up. And it just was like way too much time. I run out of ideas when it comes to recipes. But Hungry Root has got all that delicious brain food that you need. Hungry Root makes it super easy to eat healthy, high quality, nutritious food and achieve any diet or health goals by tailoring recipes to a variety of lifestyles, everything from anti-inflammatory to gut-friendly, gluten-free, or dairy-free, or high protein, and so much more. Planning meals is really easy. You just do it through the app or online. You pick out the meals, but you can even customize the ingredients on those meals, which is really nice. So if you don't want onions or something, you can just cut the onions out so you don't have to waste food. But the best thing about Hungry Root is truly how easy it is to get these meals on the table. We're talking 10, 15 minutes tops. A lot of the proteins are already sous vide or cooked already. So you're just kind of heating things back up, but it still tastes like you just made it fresh. I mean, it is so simple. We eat Hungry Root week in, week out. We're a paying customer of Hungry Root now after, trying their product for free. We love it so much that we're going to buy it every single week. I've got Hungry Root burgers that I'm making tonight, which are going to be so delicious. It's high quality protein. So many things I could say. I go on and on and on, but we love Hungry Root at my house, and I know you will too. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Let me say that again. Take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time and get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. For life. Go to hungryroot.com/milehigher and use code milehigher. That's hungryroot.com/milehigher. Use code milehigher to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. That's hungryroot.com/milehigher. Code milehigher. So Chris, he's still working at the bar, breaking glasses and, meeting hotties and personal training. I mean, a bartender and a personal trainer.
He apparently was also the personal trainer to novelist Tom Wolfe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Damn. So he's doing all this and nobody knows. They're working alongside one of the world's smartest man. However, when Good Will Hunting, which this absolutely will remind you of Good Will Hunting, was released in 1997, the general public became obsessed with finding these hidden geniuses. 2 years later, Esquire published an article interviewing the highest IQ individuals nationwide. Yeah, that movie really brought it to the forefront. And we're all very interested. We're like, wait, are there other geniuses just amongst us? There's really not. There's really not.
I mean, yeah, that's the unfortunate thing is if you're really a genius, chances are you're doing genius things. There's...
Most do.
Most do.
Most are in college by 10 years old. And,
right.
Off and already working in high paying jobs and, high caliber of intelligence by 20, they're certainly not bartending and personal training.
No.
Which again, Chris has a whole argument for, which we'll get into later, but Chris was not doing that. He was just being a bartender and a personal trainer. But he also met his wife, neuropsychologist Gina Sasso, through the Mega Society, and the two of them ended up founding their own high IQ society called the Mega Foundation. So they founded this nonprofit called the Mega Foundation, and it sounds very, very familiar. Certainly the Mega Test people thought it did, because they thought Chris was just using the name, get on boards for other societies. Eventually, the original Mega people made Chris drop the name, but that wasn't before he was appointed to numerous fellowships, including one focused on intelligent design. Because Chris's story of, one of poverty, violence, hard work, and being misunderstood by academia was an instant standout. He became even more famous when filmmaker Earl Morris interviewed him for his documentary series First Person, which we're about to show you a clip from that. And we showed you a clip at the beginning. Honestly, it's kind of worth a watch. If you want to understand him more.
And I think, I really like Errol Morris just as a filmmaker. He's a great documentarian. And I think the way he edits it is very engaging.
Very good. Yes. I like the side angle views and the panning to his eyes and stuff. So here, we'll play you a clip from it.
I wasn't invited to my graduation. My head was too large to be fitted for a cap. The cranial circumference was too great. Couldn't buy a motorcycle helmet either.
So you have a large head.
Yes. Near as I can determine, it's about 6 standard deviations above the norm. The odds against having a head the size of mine are millions to one.
And the odds of having an intelligence such as yours?
Also millions to one, but we can't necessarily infer from that there's a correlation. We'd have to have more cases of big-headed, intelligent people. My own personal opinion is, yes, head size does influence intelligence.
Size does matter.
It has to. Size does matter. I mean, if you take a very small creature with a very small head, you're never going to see a lot of intelligence out of it. Take a centipede. How smart are they? Not very smart. On the other hand, take a house cat. Well, that's somewhat smarter. Take a larger-headed creature, a monkey, even smarter than a house cat. Now take a really large-brained creature like a man. Smarter still. It seems that there is some kind of correlation going there.
What would be the volume of your brain?
Don't know. Haven't actually done it. I could do it by volumetric displacement using the Archimedean method of submerging my head in a tub of water, seeing how much water is displaced by doing that. But I haven't done that yet.
The Archimedean method of submerging my head in a tub of water.
You're probably starting to catch on. The way that he explains things is very confusing, and he just kind of definitely just talks over you. Talks, from this intelligent point of view so that you can't understand what he's saying.
I also think it's important to note that phrenology, the study of the head relating to intelligence, not only is linked to just straight up racism, they used it to justify slavery, but it's also completely debunked. It's the jury is not still out on that one.
Well, that would immediately mean I would expect most men's heads are bigger than women's heads, right?
That's also part of it, yes.
And so
that's part of
by his logic, he's also stating that men are just superior from an intelligence perspective, except for some of those women that have larger heads.
That's literally...
But when that's obviously not true, there's plenty of women that are most women are far smarter than most men. Let's be honest. So, the math doesn't compute there, but he tries to make you think it computes.
Centipede.
The centipede.
You're probably wondering, man, did this guy ever go on a game show or do anything like that? Well, sure did. Chris did continue to stick with the fame, eventually turning up on a game show 1 versus 100, where he walked out with $250,000 in cash.
Now, this really, I wish we could play it, because the question that he uses not even all of his lifelines on, I want to know if you guys know this. I'm a trivia head. In the comedic bit, who's on first? What is on second base? And the answers are who, what, where, and I don't know.
Who's on second base?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is my answer.
Okay.
Is it a trick question?
So the question is phrased in the comedic bit, who's on first, what is on second base? And then the answers are who, what, I don't know, and where.
It's whose.
Who's on first?
What's on second?
Who?
Who's on first? And what's on second?
Oh, what's on second?
Yeah.
What's
he
on
needed
second?
a lifeline for that?
He needed 2 lifelines for that.
Oh, that's it? Oh, I thought this was trick. Okay.
Yeah, that was the question.
Oh, well, shit.
Wish we could watch it.
Tripped him up.
Also, he's not watching Three Stooges. He's old, man.
He didn't have a TV, Ian. He was too busy reading books, bro. He wasn't watching Three Stooges. He was reading about advanced mathematics.
That's true. And teaching himself Latin and Greek.
Yes, which I'm sure took up a lot of time. I wonder if he was like a speed reader. I wonder if he's like, could speed read. I'd assume so with that kind of intelligence.
Or if he had a photographic memory.
Yeah.
People online were theorizing that with ChatGPT, he probably just asks ChatGPT to summarize books.
Damn.
Save him time so he can get even more knowledge. Just give me the highlights to store away. Well, Chris had moved out of New York some years previously and had a horse farm near Missouri, which he eventually expanded with his game show earnings. But Chris's fame didn't stop there. He was also given 2 chapters in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, a pop sociology book focused on people living at the extremes. Gladwell also compared Chris to Robert Oppenheimer, the leading physicist who would eventually go on to create the atomic bomb, despite being seen as too young, a communist, and bad at working with lab equipment. Interesting comparison. Gladwell saw Chris and Oppenheimer as figures who reached a similar junction, both getting kicked out of college, whereas Chris was essentially kicked out of school after his mom forgot to file financial paperwork. Oppenheimer was merely put on probation for attempting to poison one of his professors. While Gladwell ultimately chose class as a deciding factor, Chris was raised in poverty, and Oppenheimer was with the New York elite. Gladwell still seems a little suspicious of Chris's story, though. Gladwell pointed out that Reed is a small liberal arts college, well known for accommodating its more gifted students, as Chris claims to be. He also pointed to Chris saying that academic institutions did not take his theories and writings seriously because he didn't have the necessary credentials. Gladwell believes that institutions like Reed and other colleges celebrate intellectual disagreements, so he's surprised to hear Chris say that his ideas were completely discarded by the school, which I think is a really good point, right? If you have this really intelligent person, why wouldn't you want somebody like that there to challenge? What great discussion would be had in the classes with Chris. Chris would stand up and be like, no, you're wrong. And then go on this tirade of like why he's right and why they're wrong. How interesting as a student to sit there and have somebody debate your professor.
Right.
Or fucking annoying. But that is a really good point, I feel.
Well, and oh no, you go.
Unless he's just a fucking nuisance.
That's the thing is I think
he's an egotistical maniac who's pissing everybody off.
Well, and I think Malcolm Gladwell, I believe, is an alum of the other school that Chris got into, University of Chicago.
Oh.
So I believe that like he is pretty attuned to kids like Chris and how they were treated within school and within college. And in his opinion, he's like, yeah, that sort of stuff would be celebrated. So I don't know why you in particular were singled out, you know?
Well, it doesn't stop Gladwell from considering Chris to be genuinely intelligent. He just doesn't believe that has any practical intelligence. He wasn't given the space and notably wasn't of the same social class as Oppenheimer while growing up to have differing opinions or cultivate his learning beyond what he taught himself, which is all a very interesting sort of way to look at things, which I think there's probably some truth in that.
Right.
I think opportunity is absolutely a big part of your education experience and also could help determine how far you go. If you don't have the opportunity, you don't have the resources, it's going to be a harder path. Doesn't mean that you can't still succeed. It just means there's more resistance, right? Like that's not as easy if your parents pay for your school. You know, you don't have to worry about getting scholarships. You just apply wherever you want. If you get in somewhere, they've got it covered. There's none of the financial stress to it and all the opportunities there. Just by default, or your parents are alumni or something like that. You know, it's just kind of, for a lot of people, it's a very easy process. I know for me personally, it was not an easy process. I put myself through school. I got into several schools, but I didn't end up getting to go there because of financial means. So I understand the financial aspect of it because I agree with Chris that most schools are just profiting off of people. And I think the level of education has gone way down, and importance in other things that generate revenue for the college are more important oftentimes. And also just professors aren't paid enough, you know, and there's not enough professors because it's not a lucrative career path like it used to be. Which I'm speaking from experience. My grandfather was a college professor and both my parents are educators. So And they tell me all the time how fucked the system is, that, these colleges make all this money, yet where is it going? And so I think there's a lot of problems with that. So I tend to agree with some of Chris's stances around sort of the schooling system and education system, because I think it is very broken and it does kind of cater to an elite social class, which is fucked up. Everybody should have ample opportunity, like the great Bernie Sanders. College should be free for everybody. Will that ever happen?
Well, now the Department of Education is gone, so.
Yeah.
Well, with Vince.
With Vince, Mr. Vince.
With whatever the fuck her first name is, McMahon.
Shirley, right?
Such a fucking joke.
Yeah.
Such a fucking joke. Not trying to be political. It's just a fucking fact.
Yeah.
It's definitely not going to help our education system go in the right direction. So anyways, back to Malcolm Gladwell here. So here is a clip of him explaining the class differences between Oppenheimer and Chris in more detail. I found this pretty interesting.
The one story from the book that I will ask you about this evening is a different path that Chris Langan and Robert Oppenheimer took. Please very briefly describe who Chris Langan is, what he is doing, and why his path is so different from Oppenheimer, who attempted to murder his professor but became famous.
Yeah. Well, you've given away my punchline. But at this very point, I tell the story in the book about this guy named Chris Langan, who is believed to be the person with the highest IQ in maybe the world, certainly America. And his IQ is, it's impossible to tell. When you get into the upper ranges of the IQ test, of course, the IQ test ceases to become useful. So you have to develop, for people who score really high, you have to develop like super IQ tests. And then out of them, you develop an even more extravagant IQ test. It's like it's like Russian dolls. And then in the end, you have this kind of super IQ test. Anyway, this guy got like 19 out of 20 on the super IQ test. So he's for much of his life, he's been a bouncer in a bar. So the question is, how is it that the guy with the highest IQ, like that we've ever seen, he's got 40 points on Einstein, for goodness sake, right? How is it he's a bouncer in a bar? So I was trying to, the reason is, of course, that once you're past a certain point of smartness, probably an IQ of 120, all those extra IQ points don't matter. It's the same thing we've been talking about. It's an entrance criteria, not an excellence criteria. And so I thought it would be really fun to compare him. And I tell the story of his life, and his life is really interesting because he gets a scholarship to college and he drops out for the most kind of bizarre and totally hard to understand reasons. His scholarship gets screwed up and he can't convince Reed College, where he's going, to let him stay. And so he drops out. He never actually gets his BA. And this man, who by rights should have gotten like 4 PhDs and published 1,000 scientific papers, ends up as a bouncer in a bar in Long Island. And so I decided to contrast this to the story of Robert Oppenheimer, who, is a similar kind of child, one of these 1 in a billion kids with a super high IQ, and everyone thought he was a genius. But he doesn't grow up as Chris Langan did in this kind of very poor, impoverished background. He grows up on Central Park West, and he goes to ethical culture, and he goes to Harvard, and then he goes to Cambridge. And when he also, when he's in college, encounters a difficulty. Only his difficulty is not that they screw up the paperwork on his scholarship. His difficulty is that he tries to murder his tutor at Cambridge. And what happens to Oppenheimer when he tries to murder his tutor at Cambridge? He talks his way out of it. They give him probation, and the punishment is he has to go down to London and see a Harley Street psychiatrist once a week, right? So here's this wonderful, little comparison. The super brilliant kid who gets drummed out of Reed College because his paperwork gets screwed up, and the super brilliant kid who tries to murder his tutor. By the way, not just any tutor. This guy Blackburn or Black something, who goes on to win a Nobel Prize, later. So he tries to murder a future Nobel Prize winner. And what happens to him? He goes on to hold the single most important government job of the 20th century, right? The Manhattan Project. So that's all about, at this point, we are so far beyond IQ, and we're talking about other things. We're talking about your ability to negotiate your social surroundings and to get your way in the world. And so that whole chapter is all about the importance of class, because the argument there is that Oppenheimer was taught how to get his way and negotiate his way out of trouble, because that's what you learn when you grow up in an educated, wealthy family on Central Park West. That is the gift that upper middle class parents give to their kids. And that is the thing that is notably lacking from the upbringing of children who grow up on the other side of the tracks. And that's another one of these impediments that we don't want to talk about. And I think that we have to acknowledge if we're going to do something about or help those on the other side of the tracks to achieve.
What do you make of that? That was a lot to digest there.
I think I personally I really like Malcolm Gladwell, and I think that I would say that is, in Malcolm's version of events, the deciding factor. However, I think Malcolm is being very kind to Chris in assuming that he's telling the truth.
Yes.
And so I think if you were to take everything Chris has said at face value, that he is the smartest man in the world, that he did get into this college, that it got fucked up because of paperwork, then yes, class is the deciding thing that kind of didn't allow Chris to succeed the same way Oppenheimer did. However, if you're like me and you don't necessarily believe everything Chris is telling you, I still think the deciding factor is more so this lack of practical intelligence, this lack of like being able to use your intellectual capabilities, which Chris obviously has because he can speak very well, being able to use it for anything useful, aside from just talking about how smart you are.
And put thoughts into action.
Right.
Because I'm sure he has lots of thoughts about what happened with the school and why didn't my paperwork work out. But the logical, practical thing would be to then go in and talk to whoever's in charge of your financial paperwork and figure it out.
Right. I'll say, like, I ran into a very similar situation when I was in school. Granted, it was like 40 years after Chris would have gone to school, but I also forgot to file paperwork. I forgot to register for the right amount of credits, and they billed me at the beginning of the semester because they were like, your scholarship isn't going to apply anymore. So I was like, oh fuck, I can't pay $30,000 right now.
You were on a scholarship?
Yeah,
smarty pants.
Yeah, thank you. But
you earned it.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to think so.
I think scholarships are amazing, and everybody should try to get scholarships who needs them, because they're out there, and a lot of people don't even know that they're out there and don't even try to get them.
And they're you click a button when you apply. Just click a couple buttons, write a couple essays, you're good to go. But
which Chris could have done. That's the hard part for me too, is he has all this intelligence. You would think he'd be able to write the most beautiful, well-spoken essay that could win him any scholarship he wanted to any school that he wanted to go to. But why did he not do that?
Right. Well, and again, the way I solved my issue was I messaged the financial aid people. I was like, hey, what happened? And they told me, and we fixed it within a day. And again, this is 40 years after Chris would have gone to school. I have the benefit of email. There are many benefits that I enjoyed in that situation, but still.
He's got 2 legs.
Yeah.
He walked 15 miles in Montana winter.
Yeah, exactly. This is nothing.
Walk your ass over to campus and go into the financial aid. That's the thing with Chris, is it just doesn't add up. For such a logical human being, I'm like, dude, your story doesn't add up.
Right.
You can poke so many holes into your entire life story, and I get you feel like you don't need to explain to everybody, and your ego is, whatever. But I can't help but think, why didn't you just? It just seems like you didn't want to be there in the first place, or you were never there at all.
Right.
And that's the reality. And so this is just the cute version you give us so that it makes you sound cool, I guess. But yeah, it makes no sense. Dude, figure it out. You're smart. If you're this, but maybe he's just got so much going up in his head. He can't, his arms don't work, and he can't, his legs don't. And he's just thinking constantly, and which yeah, some people are like that, and they can't translate what they're thinking about to action. And so there's lots of really smart people who aren't successful for that very reason, because they can't apply these things they're thinking about into actual practical actions that work, because you really need both to function in this world and the way society is set up, right? You got to have the practical intelligence with the mental intelligence for it to sort of work. There's obviously nuances and, special scenarios where that's maybe not the case, but for the average person, you have to have some level of both.
Right.
Well, there's the whole EQ versus IQ thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people would argue now that a higher EQ is more important and useful than a higher IQ when it comes to being successful, in just in your life in general. So maybe he lacked, he had a great IQ, but on the interpersonal side and just being able to apply yourself in the day-to-day, lacking there.
So 2.5 years now, which blows my mind how fast time truly does fly. But right after I gave birth to my daughter, I started experiencing a lot of hair thinning and shedding. And I had moments in the shower where I was fully freaking out. And I started looking into solutions. And a lot of what I was finding online were painful surgeries and intense treatments that were going to require downtime, were really, really expensive. So that's when I found Nutrafol on my own before I started partnering with them. And it has completely transformed my hair. I've now been on it going on, like 2.5 years. And I never want to get off of it because I love Nutrafol so much so that I have recommended it to several friends and family who have also had great results from it. And to so many of you, I have seen your comments saying that it has been a complete game changer for you. Now, if you haven't heard of Nutrafol, it's the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. And with Nutrafol, you can see thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair and less shedding in just 3 to 6 months. Now, everyone's root causes of hair thinning are different, of course, so a one-size-fits-all approach to hair growth just doesn't cut it. So Nutrafol has multiple formulas designed to give your body what it needs to grow and support your hair's unique needs. Whether you're navigating postpartum, menopause, or a plant-based lifestyle, or simply looking to see less hair shedding, Nutrafol has you covered. And while many supplements out there rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol clinically tests final formulations to ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 90% of women saw overall improvement in their hair after taking Nutrafol Women Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is simple, people. You purchase online, there's no prescription required. Automated deliveries and free shipping will help to keep you on track. Plus, with a Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%, and you'll have access to free one-on-one naturopathic doctor consults to support you on your hair growth journey. And not only that, they are also offering a Headspace meditation in your membership, which is excellent. We love Headspace. So this summer, stop worrying about your hair and start making memories. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter promo code MileHigher. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com. That's spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MileHigher. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code MileHigher.
I would argue the interpersonals in most cases is almost more important. In most jobs, most career fields, you've got to be able to work with others and also communicate with other people.
You have to know how to play the game. Like there is someone I know in my life who is very intelligent, got really, really high SAT scores, went to a very, very good school, but struggles a lot in their day-to-day life because they don't know how to apply themselves. Their, social relationships are not good. They're struggling big time. But it's sad because it's like, God, on paper, you're a fucking genius. Like, this person is really, really intelligent, but unfortunately is
with no way to apply it. Lacks the skills, the practical intelligence to put that to work. And I think that's exactly what happened to Chris. He's got all this intelligence up there, but he lacks the skills to apply that intelligence in a productive way.
Right.
And so he'd rather stand up there and just shame everything and everybody and blame everybody else for his lack of opportunity and his lack of, it's because it's set up this way, which I agree. It is set up. It's not set up in the best way that it could be to provide ample opportunity, especially for those that come from impoverished backgrounds or, lower middle class, things like that. But if you don't even try or there are resources available to you. There is a way to do it. But if you just choose not to do it and then blame everybody for it, what are you then? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, in that way, it's hard to feel that bad for him. And it is very odd that he just did all these like physical labor jobs when he could probably have even gotten low level accounting jobs or, worked at a bank or something. If he's that good with numbers and good with, solving puzzles and everything else. There's so many other jobs that he could have done with no college education that he could have then proved his intelligence and climbed the ranks that way just by proving I don't need school because I just have this intelligence, kind of Elon Musk type situation, right?
Well, and I believe there was a stint where Chris worked for like a computer software company.
Yeah.
And I believe he got that through the Mega Foundation after he took the test. They were like, oh, we can hook you up with this job. But, there's so much is not written about that time that I believe it was even like less than a year that he was able to keep that job. And for the most part, it has just been physical labor or bouncing or good old-fashioned just training people.
Like, in order to be successful in life, you really have to learn how to play the game. And it's like when you go in for a job interview, you could be the most qualified on paper, the quote-unquote smartest person. But if you can't relate to them and sell yourself, really, then you're not as likely to get a job. And, someone who's maybe, on paper a little less qualified, but is able to make those emotional connections and be likable and be someone that people want to work with. Like, that's what people are looking for. That's how you're successful. It's the old saying, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think to some extent that's really true.
Being an employer myself, I look for people. I don't necessarily look for the most intelligent people. And that's, except for Ian. We hired Ian purely on
because I'm a dumbass. Yeah.
His low IQ really sold us. But the reality is, what you start learning as an employer is that you look for people who have great potential and have great skills that can be developed and can be tuned to best fit your business and your line of work. And those are the people that usually make it far, is because they recognize that and they're just that type of person that they enjoy that and they enjoy learning and soaking things up and don't have an arrogant attitude about it. Nobody wants to work with people like that. I actually worked with a guy in Geek Squad back in the day when I worked, when I was a computer nerd. I worked with this guy named Eli, and Eli was very, very arrogant. And he was that guy. If you brought your computer up to the counter and said, I need help with this, he would shame you at the counter. A college kid come and be like, man, my computer's running slow. He'd look at it for like a split second and be like, well, it's because you're doing this. Basically, you're an idiot. Turn it off, get a new computer, have a nice day. And then he'd go in the back and work on his calculus homework.
This guy sounds awesome.
He was kind of awesome, though, because he'd do show tunes in the back as well.
Really?
Damn.
He'd sing show tunes while he was doing his calculus while simultaneously working on computers. I actually learned a lot from him. Because I tried to play up my intelligence with him and try to act like I know what he's talking about. And, oh, yeah, derivatives. Yeah, dude. Love it. Yeah.
Derivatives.
I love show tunes. Can you sing that one? But the arrogance, and the ego that some of these people have is ultimately, I think, what's holding them back from being successful in society. Is nobody wants to be around somebody who talks to you like that. Nobody wants to be talked down on and felt inferior. And when he's literally out there saying everybody's inferior, I could have taught the professors. It doesn't matter your level of intelligence. If you present yourself in such a way, nobody wants you around. You're going to be a lonely guy with all this shit going on up in your head. And I think it's also, Chris seems to spend a lot of time thinking about things that don't necessarily have a career path associated with it, especially as we start talking about basically his life's work, which is the CTMU, or the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the universe. And he seems to be very interested in almost being a spiritual leader in a way, in kind of like this great philosopher. It seems like he's more interested in being a philosopher than he is applying that intelligence as something that can be better used in society. You know what I mean? Like, that would also garner him accolades and high-paying job, things like that. So that's what we're going to kind of shift into talking about, is explaining this whole CTMU theory that he's come up with. It's very, very confusing. But let's play some of this clip from a Spike Jonze interview in 2019 with Chris.
So I thought emotional intelligence would require some self-awareness also, some intelligence about your own emotional...
Well, that's called metacognition. Basically, it's a kind of a transcendental ability where you rise above yourself and look down on yourself from above. It's a different level of thought where you've got the level, the object level, where you're talking about things that you see, and then you talk about the level where you talk about yourself, talking about things that you see. And then you can go up from there. And metacognition, if it's mobile, it can actually go up an arbitrary degree until finally you experience oneness with the universe.
So is it a spiritual, is it connected to spirituality?
Yes, ultimately it does, and ultimately it is, because you connect with the identity of reality itself, if you can do it well enough.
Which brings us to you should probably explain it, but the...
CTMU, Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe.
And that's the project you're working on?
Yes, it's the attempt to understand ultimate reality.
Are you trying to discover something or prove something? How would you define it? Is it...
Well, you're trying to do both. When you're trying to understand reality, you want to be able to use that understanding for other purposes if you have them. But also there's a certain amount of insight and pleasure to be gotten from just understanding what reality is. And that's what the CTMU does for me. And it could potentially do for others as well.
And what's your theory of what reality is?
If you take a look at reality, the highest level of reality, the very highest level, is going to be an identity. An identity is something that distributes over everything in the system, right? And the CTMU is designed to be that identity. So it is everywhere present on both physical and metaphysical levels.
But the one thing you talked about is that I remember when I was researching you was your idea was that if you can hold this entire universe in your mind's eye simultaneously and all of its complexities, that then you'll be able to understand God.
Isn't that what God does?
Yeah.
He holds everything in his mind or his meta-mind simultaneously. So in order to really understand what reality is and what God is, you have to be able to kind of do that yourself. Of course, we're just human beings, so the only way we can do that is to wrap everything up in a very small package. That's what the CTMU is.
So what is God in your mind? Or what is God?
Well, God has been called a number of things, but one of the things he's been called, especially in Christian theology, which is our dominant theology, he's been called logos, which is the word, which, of course, word means a piece of language. You're looking at a piece of language. And that is exactly what the CTMU is. It models reality as a language.
What's your definition of God, personally?
The identity of reality. You see, I've been talking about reality, and I've been talking about the identity of reality. God is reality. As a matter of fact, God is the ultimate reality. He is reality on its very highest level. No other definition of God makes sense.
So the idea is that the universe and all of us and our mind and our perception all adds up to be God?
Right. The universe is a coupling of mind and perceptual reality. Right? What you see out there, the external world and the internal world being your mind. This is a coupling. And it's not a coupling you can take apart and reduce to separate parts. It is one thing with two aspects. That's what I mean by a coupling, and that's what the universe is. And that's what God is as well. So, except God has the power.
How many times has he defined the CTMU? How many different ways? Just in that clip right there, he said, he gave like 5 different definitions for what he's trying to talk about without explaining it any further.
Hence why he's like, so what is God to you?
Yeah.
What is God in your mind? And he just talks circles around you.
Right.
And it's all like you can capture bits and pieces. And when you capture those bits and pieces, you're like, why are you explaining this in such this confusing way when you're just saying that basically all of the universe and reality is all one and the same. There's no difference. We are a part of it. Then the CTMU almost sounds like he's then applying, and this is what he is doing, he's applying a language model to it. Like he's trying to apply this computer language model to it to explain it in what he thinks is a different way. But he's just taking a spiritual concept that's been already spoken about in this exact way that he's explaining it since basically the beginning of time. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of philosophers and spiritual leaders and teachers who all say the same thing, that the ultimate reality is God. God is us. God is one. We're all part of it. There is no difference. But the way he's just flipping back and forth, trying to confuse the interviewer here is it's almost comical. It's like, dude, why aren't you, but just stick to one thing. Like, Why are you switching it up constantly, trying to confuse us? Because it makes you sound smarter. And comes across like this guy's a dummy. He can't get what I'm trying to say. But it's not this complex idea you're coming up with. This is something that's already been there. It's been out there for a long time. And then he created this, 90 pages,
89 pages.
Attempting to explain the intricacies of this, but really just throwing a bunch of confusing terms and some made up terms into it because it just seems like he really wants to be the guy known for discovering God and discovering that this long-standing theory and philosophical idea that's been out there for a long time. Well, I've proven it. I have created the recipe that explains why this exists and proves that it does in fact exist. But then he says a bunch of other things that are just completely detract away from this. Like, if this is really the message and really the life's work that you're doing, then how come all of the other thoughts and opinions that you have don't line up with this either?
Right.
It makes absolutely no sense. And for somebody who claims to be as because now he's also not only saying I'm intelligent on like the human level, but I am working towards achieving this conscious mind of God, that I am one with God. Therefore, I see all the things that God sees as well. He puts himself, God, Chris Langan, the rest of us way the fuck down here. And I think that's very intentional.
Absolutely. Well, and it, I was telling you guys beforehand, but the way he writes and the way he thinks about the world, to me, is very similar to Ziz and the way that Ziz wrote in her blogs.
Yes.
And it's this intentionally confusing language that endears people, because either you're like us and you are just like, this is fucking nonsense, or you're someone who thinks that they get it. And because you think that you get it, you feel like, oh, I'm in the club with the smartest guy in the world. That means I must also be on this level with God, And that it's cult tactics. Even though I wouldn't say Chris leads a cult, it is why he still is kind of taken seriously among certain people.
But it's very much an elitist mindset.
Right.
Which he also turns around and bashes constantly and, basically says all the elites control the world, which is great. But you're basically doing the same thing by this CTMU that you've created. And by the way that you describe it, like, you're not actively trying to help other people understand these complex ideas and thoughts that you're supposedly having, but rather you're just continuing to confuse people and then basically be like, well, too bad you're not smart enough to understand what I'm saying, even though actual smart, intelligent people have looked at what you're saying and it makes absolutely zero sense whatsoever. So let's talk about the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the universe, or the theory of everything that attempts to claim the very nature of reality itself. Because of course, a guy with an ego the size of the fucking universe wants to set out to prove the existence of God and the existence of God in his mind, what that is. So he originally published this work in 1998 before releasing a paperback version in 2002. And in a nutshell, the CTMU says that the nature of reality lies in its perception. Reality exists to be perceived, and therefore there must be something to perceive it. By starting with that basic level, Chris believes that you can work up the levels of perception until it eventually proves the existence of God. Is because the entire universe exists, something else must exist to perceive it fully. So there must be something to perceive the universe for the universe to exist itself. Therefore, there must be a God.
But then also he doesn't, for me, I'm like, then you can, if just applying that same logic, you can take that to the next step. It's like, well, then doesn't there need to be something that exists to perceive God? What is that?
Why is God the end all be all?
Right.
How did God come along?
Right.
What is it? He still can't define what is God.
Right.
And then he references Christian theology, which is obviously one version. And he kind of alludes to, like, yes, God is called a lot of different names, but he doesn't provide any clear answers of what is God, other than very, very generic terms that a lot of people have used. But let's take a look at this CTMU cover. So if we're looking at it, we've got what does that look like? Looks like a swastika. A little bit. Which again, if you know anything about swastika, that was it's had different meanings over the years, but largely, we all know what the swastika is used for. But let's take a look at some clips of Chris explaining the CTMU throughout the years.
Are you seeing me right now through that monitor in front of you?
No.
The answer is yes or no, and if you can't choose, you can't perceive me. You don't know whether I'm here or not. 1 or 0, yes or no. Binary logic is something you depend on. Without it, you can't have so much as a single perception. If we can base insight to God on binary logic, we got it made. We don't need faith anymore. It's extraneous, irrelevant.
And hence my theory of reality, CTMU.
You have the universe. The universe is closed. It is one unary entity. That's your primary quantum. Okay? But now everything, it's got to be self-composed because there's nothing external of which it can be composed.
It is completely self-contained. In other words, it's undefined from the perspective of anything outside it. As a matter of fact, there is no outside perspective, which makes it undefined. This external non-definition, right? It's got to define itself completely internally. And this amounts to freedom. It is externally unconstrained. All of its constraint comes from within. It's self-determined, and that includes the power to self-configure, which the universe has because there's nothing external to configure it. Anything external to reality is irrelevant to reality, and you might as well not even talk about it. So it's the first requirement of discourse. Now, the universe is composed only of itself. There's nothing else but the universe, but the identity of the universe to comprise the universe.
You've got one unified identity, but it is self-dual. It consists of both mental and physical aspects. They are unified from the top down. Basically, reality self-distributes and self-differentiates from the top down.
Again, I'm hearing a lot of the same things, but there's no explanation happening.
Right. Well,
he's just using different terms to describe the same thing over and over again. But it's all shit we already knew.
Right. It's all shit that he started with. It's his first point, just explaining different. And that's what, again, Professor Dave in his takedown of Christopher Langan, he watches the Daily Wire interview, which we clip a bunch throughout it. And he just stops at point by point and says, like, he still is not defining it. He still is not defining it. He's just adding new explanations, adding new descriptors and adjectives and a bunch of new bullshit. But he doesn't ever actually explain what he's trying to say.
It's just meaningless to all of us.
Yeah.
I'm trying very hard. Like, I pick up pieces of things that he's saying, but then I'm like, what's the point?
Right.
What's your big point here? Like, what are you trying to say? There's tons of scientists that have claimed the same things. The guy who wrote the simulation hypothesis has said the exact same thing. It's all binary. It's all, ones and zeros if you look at the way the universe is laid out and these exact points that he's bringing up. So I'm like, what is your original thing? Like, what's your original point here? What discovery did you make with CTMU, whatever the fuck? What is it? The theory of nothing.
Right. Literally the theory of nothing.
And he wonders why academics aren't taking it seriously. It's like, well, what did you discover?
There's nothing. There's just nothing to talk about.
You like to talk about this, but what are you getting at? And in every interview, it seems like he never can get to the point of, well, what's the groundbreaking discovery you made here? You can't prove God. There's no way to prove God's existence.
Right.
Through the methods that you're using anyway. So what are you proving then?
Well, and it's like if you look at, actual huge groundbreaking discoveries or theories of everything, the theory of relativity, E equals MC squared, that was a huge deal. Like that single discovery. And yes, it's not proven because you can't prove it. But the fact that equation can lead to discoveries, that was a huge fucking deal. What is the E equals MC squared of the CTMU? It's nothing. There's nothing like that within it.
That's all you need to know about Chris.
Have you ever thought about what it would be like to be a celebrity and to have your own personal stylist who does your shopping for you, basically dresses you? I dream about it. It would be really nice to never have to think about it, to never have to make that trip to the mall, never have to figure out your sizing. Well, with Stitch Fix, you can get about as close to that as possible because Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. Shopping and figuring out your style can just be flat out overwhelming. And when it comes to getting dressed, some days I don't even know where to start, man. And that's why I love having a Stitch Fix stylist. She really knows what works for me, and I get pieces that make me look great, and it's a real confidence boost. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences, and I order boxes when and how I want to. There's no subscription required, and she sends me just for me pieces plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. Then I keep what I love and send back the rest. It seriously could not be easier. And I love that I can really customize the process. Like if I have an event coming up, or if I want certain colors, or maybe I just want t-shirts for that month or just jeans, I can completely customize my order. And I've been using Stitch Fix for years. I've gotten so many of my favorite pieces from them, and it's really just such an amazing process. And it, like I said, couldn't be easier. And I don't know how they get the fit so right. I feel like my stylist, since she's been working with me for so long, has really figured me out. But it's really like having my own personal style support person. But the best part for me, man, no crowds, no stress, no stores, just personalized looks that I'm gonna love. And you're gonna love them too. Personal styling for everyone. Get started today at stitchfix.com/milehigher. That's stitchfix.com/milehigher.
Well, let's show you some more clips here, because if you're not already confused, well, you're about to get really confused, and then you're about to get really fucking pissed off, because I think Chris gets very angry that people don't take him seriously, and that so he goes to the group that will accept whoever, and things get very, very bad very fast. But let's finish up with CTMU here real quick. So Chris believes that by working through different levels of perception, one can prove the existence of God and simulation theory, which we all love to think about simulation theory. So let's hear what he has to say.
In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect, okay? And God, it captures both of those things. It captures both the display and the processing.
What do you mean? I hate to put it in the...
Well, I mean, okay, here's the display. You realize the display contains states.
Yep.
Okay, you see things, the objects contains it. States are static.
Yep.
That's why they're called states. Okay, static. How do they change? Well, they have to be processed.
Also not true.
Something has to be processed.
Yeah.
And in the calculus, for example, those are tiny little infinitesimal intervals. Okay, but they are not actually contained in the states themselves. They have a neighborhood, a little tangent space or what have you, where you can sort of draw little vectors that suggest that some kind of processing is going on. But the idea of being a state and being a process, those are two different things.
Yeah.
In the ordinary way of looking at it, okay? It turns out that you can't properly describe reality and causation at all unless you put those things together somehow. And that's what it takes God to do. Okay? God provides the processing functionality for your state. You have an internal state, an external state. You're a material human being, right? Like to explain how that is changing through time, and maintaining its coherence through time, even as it changes. That's what you need God for.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that entirely. And so I might not be sophisticated enough to parse all of the quibbles that there might be, but broadly speaking, as a Christian, so much of what you're saying resonates as obviously true for me. The idea that, I'm a member of the body of Christ. The idea that God creates the world in this great act of love, this great act of charity.
Self-love.
Self-love.
Don't forget, you're an image of God.
Right.
So in loving himself, God loves you.
And God...
See, he should have been a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah, he should just open a church.
He might.
Just preach. I mean, it seems like that's where he wants to go with that. Yeah, I like how all of a sudden Mikey from the Daily Wire is like, well, let me dumb this down for myself. And then he goes into the whole biblical, creation story, basically. And Chris is like, oh, yeah, basically, yeah, that's what it is.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for backing me up. Finally, somebody backs me up here. We need God because, he built everything in his image, and that's exactly what it is. It's, him loving himself by creating us and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so why not just be a preacher then?
Right.
If that's ultimately your philosophy ultimately agrees with the biblical version of creation, what's the point of all this then? Why are you then confusing everybody with all this other stuff when that's ultimately the simplified version of what your whole life's work is about, proving the existence of God? But he's trying to prove it through all these fancy terms and numbers and trying to make this really smart, complicated equation of his work. He's, like Ian said, he's looking for that E equals MC squared moment for himself. And I think that's really what he's chasing. He thought CTMU was going to be that. Like, oh, everybody's like, oh my God.
Fuck.
Bow down, Chris. is God. He figured it out.
Right.
He's got the math to prove it.
But there's no math.
There's no math.
There's no math.
There's no math. Lots of metaphysical concepts, which are great, but it doesn't ultimately. It's just a theory. It's just which again, it says theoretic model. So he's not saying it's fact, but he's basically saying it's fact. We could go on and on and on about CTMU, but I'm sure your head already hurts. Mine hurts right now just sitting here. So there's a lot more we could go into, but that video really covers it pretty much through and through if you want to look at that, because I'm sure a lot of you are bored already of like, what the hell? If none of this makes sense, then do I care to even hear anymore? And I'm with you. Yeah, because this kind of piggybacks off of what you just saw. So intelligent design is a religious theory that states that while science, evolution, and everything else are real, they were intelligently designed that way by a creator, deity, or God. Chris, as a lifelong Christian, has always been a believer in intelligent design and will come out with a new interview every few years that exclaims, "The world's smartest man proves that God is real." And there's an infinite number of clips on YouTube with this. But let's take a look at this interview clip here.
Do you believe in God? Many of the 7 billion people on planet Earth would say yes. But for one Heartland man, faith is not good enough. Chris Langan wants proof and says he's found it. He's a blue-collar, former city dweller who spent 25 years as a bouncer in the nightclubs of New York.
They don't ask you what your IQ is. They don't ask you how smart you are.
None of Langan's life looks too out of the ordinary.
Part of it was, of course, finding a place to live where you had a certain amount of freedom.
But in addition to berry picker and farmer, Chris Langan is one of the smartest men in the world.
Part of it also was to, I guess, have a certain amount of privacy as well.
He's not a priest, a rabbi, or a prophet, but his arrival to the Princeton area was a pilgrimage. Langan is noted as one of the smartest minds in the world.
If you took the very best minds from the very best universities in the world, they wouldn't be able to put a dent in me or my theory.
He's not using ancient texts to prove God's existence, but metaphysics.
It includes physics and the natural sciences, but it also goes to a level above, a level on which you can actually talk about the entirety of science.
CTMU is the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the universe. It's Langan's philosophical theory that he says proves God's existence.
The existence of God can be proven if God is properly defined in the first place.
He's dedicated to the idea that this theory should be pursued by mankind.
Every religion that actually has truth in it, that actually has logical integrity, can be interpreted in this overall frame.
He's not your conventional intellectual. In fact, he doesn't even have a college degree.
I'm pretty much an autodidact. I teach myself everything by necessity.
He's attempted a degree twice, but intellectual capital did not translate into financial capital.
I had no choice at that point but to drop out.
Shortly after he was discovered by Esquire magazine, he began the Make a Foundation.
This, I decided, would be a kind of an intelligence society, not an ordinary IQ society, but one with more...
I think the big problem with, for one, the problem with Chris going on all these shows and being interviewed all these times is that everyone just takes his shit at face value. They're like, he's the smartest man in the world.
Yeah, it's the same info every time.
Every single time. And I think like when you look at the CTMU, which again he claims is a theory of everything, it fails. It's not even like a proper scientific theory in that it provides no mathematic model for which to test anything. And then furthermore, a theory of everything is like a very specific type of theory that explains, it explains very specific things within physical science, which Chris's theory does not do. There's not a single number, and he uses words like language and mathematics interchangeably.
Quantum.
And he just says quantum.
Stuff, yeah.
He just says stuff. So it's nothing. It's just not, when he says like this should be pursued by mankind. What
are they supposed to do with it?
Yeah, man. What
other than throw it in the trash?
Right.
Any educated scientist. Well, it's almost like, and he's doing it under the guise of, well, I'm superior to all these intellectuals in academia because I'm in the metaphysical realm. I understand all the natural physical sciences, but I also understand the metaphysical as well. And that's a whole level above where all these other guys are at. So therefore, they just aren't smart enough. They're not enlightened enough. They're not tuned in with God enough to where they can, as he said, couple everything together, which is just, because he is known as the world's smartest man, it works for him, and people still give him the time of day and still give him the attention that he gets, that he gladly seems to eat up. But it's like, put him in a room let's see him in a room I want to see him talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
Right.
That's who I want, because that guy is also very smart and very sure of himself as well. Borderline arrogant at times. I want to see him go toe to toe with Christopher Langan. That would be interesting, because talk about somebody who understands the universe and understands the natural and physical laws and actually gets it, from a scientific perspective. I'd love to see him speak on Chris Langan, and he probably would. He'd be like, "This is a bunch of bullshit.
It's not even worth my time."
No. There's nothing to even talk about here.
Carl Sagan has a quote that's along the lines of like, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And if you're saying I can prove the existence of God, but then you don't provide the evidence or anything to back up that theory, then it's nonsense. It's just nonsense.
Right. But according to him, he does.
Right.
Just nobody understands it yet because we're all too stupid.
Right. And maybe we are.
Yeah, maybe we are. Maybe he knows some shit and we're just all dumb. And Chris is the one guy, like Jesus Christ, that just, basically son of God. I mean, he's right up there. But it's like, come on, dude, you really think we believe that?
Well, and also the reason he thinks that the CTMU has been silenced is very, very funny.
Yes, which we're about to get into. So this is where shit really, you might be thinking, guys, why have you been so hard on him? Why are you doubting him? Well, here we go. So it's not just academia that's Chris claims is trying to silence him. If we go back to 2001, after the 9/11 attacks, Chris claimed that President Bush engineered the attacks to distract the world away from his CTMU theory. And unfortunately, that's not the only conspiracy theory the world's smartest man believes in. Here's where shit gets really, really wild. So Chris's crazy fucking beliefs, especially in conspiracy theories, go all the way back to his first-person interview with Earl Morris, in which he supported the use of eugenics. Here's that clip.
You can't run a democracy with a citizenry that really doesn't know how to make valid decisions. Most people don't even know what decision theory is. They don't know what maximization of utility is. We live in a highly complex technological world, and it's not entirely obvious what's right and what's wrong in any given situation unless you can parse the situation, deconstruct it. People just don't have the insight to be able to do that very effectively. We have to have an educated and intelligent citizenry, which I regret to say we don't necessarily have at the present time.
Say you had the opportunity to run the world. How would you do it?
Well, one of the first things that I would do is I would institute something like the Manhattan Project for a safe, long-lasting means of birth control. Simply implant that in all children at age 10. That would solve our population problem right off the bat. It would also enable us to practice a benign form of eugenics, or I should probably say anti-dysgenics. Prevent undesirable genetic mutations in the human genome. People who wanted to have children would apply to make sure they had no diseases. Either we have to do it through genetic engineering, or we have to let only the fit breed. We like to think that it is our right to breed as incontinently as we want to, have as many kids with whomever we want to. Future generations of mankind are being saddled with the results of what we do. Or don't do. Freedom is not necessarily a right. It is a privilege that you have to earn. A lot of people abuse their freedom, and that is something that people have to be trained not to do.
But who? Who does this training?
Well, I'd be perfectly willing to do it myself. Just put me in charge.
Chris also believes in the protocols of the Elders of Zion, a long discredited conspiracy theory that basically created contemporary anti-Semitism and hatred against Jewish people. The protocols, which has been proven to be a forgery, claim to be written notes from a meeting with Jewish leaders in 1903 who were planning on taking over the world and subjugating Christian Europeans. However, here's Chris attempting to defend its contents, writing, quote, "There is no doubt that it contains a brilliant recipe for the subjugation, destruction, and replacement of Western civilization, and that this recipe has been scrupulously followed. He also believes that the government is paying people of color to replace white people."
It's just straight up.
There you go. He recounts a story where he decided not to have children because he didn't want to subject them to poverty. Meanwhile, a person of color comes up to him and tells him that the government pays him to have kids and that he has nearly 40 children, which is safe to say the story is entirely made up. He also points to a time in his life when he had to move away from New York because he couldn't secure a home loan, but states that applicants who weren't white were given loans even if they didn't have a job. Again, almost certainly made up, and by Chris's admission, he only made $6,000 a year while living in New York, and the smartest man in the world is not exactly a job with a paycheck, which $6,000 a year? However, this leads to Chris's next belief, the Kalergi population replacement theory. Kalergi was a German-Japanese politician in the 1920s who believed in what would become the European Union and that people of all backgrounds should be able to live together in harmony. However, other politicians at the time, namely Adolf Hitler, said that Kalergi wanted this so more people would have interracial children. Chris straight up believes that non-white people are less intelligent than white people. There you go. And that this would allow people like Kalergi to control the world. So it's obvious Chris is just a straight up racist. Let's just be honest. In a memorial post for Coco the gorilla, a gorilla born in the San Francisco Zoo, he said, quote, "Yet the nations of Europe and North America are being flooded with millions of unvetted Somalian refugees who are not initially kept in cages despite what appears to be the world's highest rate of violent crime." Why did he say this during a post for a gorilla born in the zoo? Who knows?
Who knows?
I mean, what the fuck? Which we could spend forever talking about all of Chris's very far-right views, but let's just say that he has defended Nazis, he hates interracial relationships, and believes that white people are being replaced in Western society. So there you go. There you have it.
This is why we've been shitting on this dude.
Mm-hmm.
So why should anyone fucking care about anything that comes out of your mouth when you think like this? And especially in one token, you're talking about how we're all one with the universe and God. We're all from the same source. And yet
you're a racist
you're over
asshole.
here fucking having it seems like your spiritual level of consciousness is very low, my friend.
Very well. And also, like, it's not even that he's a normal racist in that he doesn't even believe contemporary racist things. He believes in, like, the protocols of the Elders of Zion has been disproven since, like, the 1930s. Like, this is old school, old-fashioned racism that just, like, people have adapted. They've gotten better at being racist. He still is believing the old shit.
He found some dusty-ass book in some fucking podunk library out in the sticks that's still run by some 90-year-old woman. And he read it. And he was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense to me. This is why my life is shitty.
It's the Jews.
It's all of this nonsense. Well, Chris, you should just stay offline, man. His work recently has also amounted to just posting responses on forums and social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. Or X. Here he is responding to a Reddit post criticizing the mega test. He said, quote, "No offense taken, of course, but off the cuff, my thoughts are that you're probably a disgruntled little fellow who flunked. The mega test is now brimming with sour grapes. You sound like you're ready to pop and shrapnel your readers with grapeseed." Okay. The mega test isn't perfect, and I don't mind your criticism of it. I don't rely or make claims regarding the mega test, so I don't really care. I generally let reporters do the research, make the IQ claims. However, I do care when some resentful pseudonymous troll gets personal and assures that everyone in my work amounts to so-called affair. Either tell everyone your real name so you can be identified, vetted, and squashed like a stink bug by me personally, or stop trolling people about whose work you know nothing. I'm quite sure you know nothing about CTMU because you're clearly a troll, and trolls don't usually have the intelligence to wrap their puny little heads around that sort of thing. Thanks for your attention and have a nice day. So the so-called affair that he mentioned in there was a 1996 scholarly hoax done by Professor Alan Sokol. Alan submitted a paper full of nonsense words, incorrect facts, and unverified theories in order to test the integrity of the journal he submitted it to. Chris often gets compared to so-called affair, as the CTMU is also filled with lots of nonsense words, incorrect facts, and unverified theories. However, Chris maintains that his paper is an earnest work of science. Just doing it for the betterment of him.
It would be so, like, Chris could turn this all around if tomorrow he said, you know what, the CTMU is made up and everyone who believed in it, I was just testing to see if you were a dumbass.
Yeah, and he renounces all of his fucked up views, too.
Yeah, that too.
He needs to get right with the Lord. I mean, let's be honest. He's not reading the Bible hard enough because this doesn't align. Well, all of this has made Chris a darling of the fear right. I mean, the far right. Might as well be fear right. But he's obviously gone on to support our president and commander-in-chief, saying that he's a very high IQ man.
Oh, boy.
Which, based on his recent
medical
results, it's hard to argue with that.
That's right.
Very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And his cognitive test that no other president takes, he made sure of it.
Mm-hmm.
He likes to do those sort of things for fun. So, of course, he's highly respected on all of those forums. You name it, he's on there. He's well respected. He's got quite the fan base, Chris does. So much so that his fans are clamoring for him to debate Jordan Peterson, which I would love. That'd be quite the show to watch.
Do you guys have a good Jordan Peterson impression?
No, I don't even want to try.
I think you need to have a good Kermit the Frog impression first, and then you can work your way up.
Yes, Kermit the Frog, for sure. But let's talk about also why he's kind of been in the sort of social media cycle in the relative past, I would say. Because this Daily Wire, which we showed you a clip from already, but this Daily Wire interview was not supposed to come out.
Right.
It was scrapped, right?
It was scrapped. Chris put it out through his CTMU YouTube channel and titled it "The Interview They Didn't Want You to See."
We love that. They.
Who's they, Chris? Who's they?
The elitists. The Acadummies.
The Acadummies.
The Acadummies don't want you to see this.
The Acadummies at the Daily Wire.
You know what happens if you watch this interview all the way through? You become an Acadummy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is fucking horrible. It is terrible.
Really bad.
There is nothing good in this. Let's show you a little bit of it. A little bit more of it, I should say.
You mentioned everyone getting stuck with the Fauci ouchie for the last 2 years. And, it's so extremely effective that we all need to take 55.
Yeah, so cool.
Just two boys kicking back, chatting.
Marvel at the perfection and efficacy of it. Are you anti-vaccine generally? I take it you're anti-COVID.
Well, I bought into the COVID thing at first, and I went out and bought, Gina and I bought, gas masks for us, and those N100 masks, and and I advised people what to do so as not to get infected with the deadly COVID. And then I noticed that it wasn't really killing. I live in northern Missouri.
It wasn't really
nobody
killing
up there
people.
was wearing masks. Nobody up there. I mean, and nobody was dying of COVID-19. So I realized, there's something a little bit
Literally,
off.
what are you talking about?
Pause it.
What the fuck are you talking about, sir?
What channel are you watching? Well, probably could guess, but
yeah, I was gonna say, don't answer that.
Come on.
I mean, we have the number here. It was 21,621 Missourians died of complications due to COVID-19 between 2020 and 2022.
Just people in Missouri,
right?
Not worldwide. Worldwide, we're talking a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, no, wasn't seeing anybody drop dead in front of me. So even though I bought a gas mask,
dude.
And so I, kind of started getting away from it. And then I noticed that, then I noticed that it was being used as a pretext for something called the Great Reset.
I was a little disappointed. A little.
Okay.
I'm very disappointed in everything he said. But when I first came across him, I'm seeing titles of what does he think about UFOs and aliens and heaven and hell and angels and demons? And then he gets asked these questions and he just lets you down.
Yeah.
Someone's like, so you believe in angels and demons? He's like, yes. And you're like, that's it? The guy that's literally proven God's existence in the universe and you don't have anything more insightful to say? So I'm very let down by Chris on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also just, it's a lack of not only journalistic integrity, but just YouTube clickbait to still keep calling this fucking guy the smartest guy in the world. I think that's really what it is that just a million people will still want to interview him just because they don't want to look at the fact that he cheated on his IQ test that he still hasn't even provided proof of taking in the first place.
Yeah.
And his ego loves it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, he's very egotistical. I think it's very obvious to all of us at this point that he loves it. He loves the attention. He's just, I'm at a loss for words. There's a lot of things I want to say that I can't say on here, but he's not that smart.
No, man.
He's not that smart. His mind thinks about things maybe differently than some of us do, but even then I'm like, how do I even know?
If he was in the room right now and you could ask him something, what would you ask him?
I'd ask him why are you so racist?
Yeah.
I want to know
Fair.
why'd you become so racist, bro? Like, just what made you go down that thought path? Like, I don't get it. Is it because you feel you just, because of your lack of practical intelligence and you weren't able to have the accolades in career and financial means that you clearly think you deserve? Therefore, to explain that away, you went down this path, down the conspiracy path, and like everybody's out to get us. And, I'm just echoing things I've said before on the show, but it seems that's what happened. He just like wanted an excuse to blame why his life ended up the way that it did. So this is the way he went. And also he started going down that path, and I'm sure he quickly realized, oh, I get loads of support over here. This is great. If I throw God in there, it helps me even more, So I think that's really what it is. But I'd love to know, what is that? Why? Or for somebody so intelligent who seemed to at one time had maybe some great spiritual perspective and was thinking about things at a high, spiritual level. Why the downward spiral here?
Right.
What happened?
I think it's really just, and you see this with a lot of not only just high IQ society people, but just with this kind of like far right grifter, is the constant victim mentality. It's like look at my IQ with this amount of knowledge. I should be the smartest fucking guy ever. I should have millions of dollars, but I don't. So whose fault is that? And they believe it's typically people of color. That's where they go immediately every time. It's just the victim mentality.
Yep.
I don't have all this money, so somebody else does.
And it's not fair.
Right.
Me. Poor me. Dude, we're all so tired of it. We're all tired of it. Yeah, well, there you have it.
We love to see it.
We love to see it. That's Chris Langan, the world's smartest, but we're dubbing him the world's dumbest man. The world's dumbest man who had such great potential to be. I think if Chris had gone, had some more practical intelligence, and I think he probably did have a rough childhood. It sounds pretty terrible. And was he lying about that? I don't know. But if that's what happened, that's really shitty. And I feel bad for him that was his childhood. But when you become an adult, you have to take responsibility as an adult, and you have to take it upon yourself to make shit happen for you, because it just doesn't happen. There's not, and I'm sure somebody will be like, well, divine plan and everything, it's God's plan, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, to some extent, you've got to make shit happen for yourself. And if your financial paperwork that your mama was not filling out for you, you could have walked your ass over there and talked to the woman and be like, hey, I really need to finish school because I'm a genius and I'm going to do really great things for the world. What do I need to do? It was probably some simple shit. If he even went to school, which we haven't seen transcripts. We haven't seen any proof of anything at this point. So who even fucking knows if that's even all? And that's the hard thing too. Is he just a fucking liar? Is he just lying about all this?
I would love to talk to someone who he grew up with.
I would like to talk to his wife even.
True. That would be great.
What's it like living with this guy?
Anyone that personally has spent a lot of time with him would be very interesting to talk to, because I wonder if their stories align with his in any capacity,
Such wasted potential.
Yeah.
Which is sad, because I think he put in the right environment, surrounded by the right people, he could have been something. I mean, I could definitely see him being a professor himself. I could see him in a similar role to somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson, somebody who runs a museum and, is a personality or almost a educational entertainer in a way, because he definitely has some of those qualities. And I think he's very bitter about where he's ended up, even though he claims he loves his simple life and, loves farming and all that, which is great too. But based on his interviews, it seems like and his points of view and some of the conspiracies he believes, he's very salty about a lot of stuff. And he's very angry that he just wasn't afforded these things, yet he didn't make any of those things happen for himself, even though he was capable the entire time. Especially if you are the world's smartest man. And sorry, that's the title that's given to you, so we're going to hold you to that. And so out of everybody in the world, there ain't an excuse for you, bro. There's no excuses. I don't feel bad for him. I think he's a lost, troubled soul. I think he needs to spend some more time in his Bible, or, do some more praying, some self-reflection, maybe some meditation, maybe some Kundalini yoga.
Perhaps.
Oh boy.
Perhaps he could benefit. Honestly, too much weightlifting and testosterone.
Yeah. Like, you need to calm down, bro, and really think about your life, because I think you could have made something of yourself and you just didn't for whatever reason, because you decided to blame everybody else and all your circumstances. But hey, it's his life. He knows God's real. He knows there's an afterlife, it sounds like. So maybe he thinks he's good to go.
But it's interesting to me that he's so confident that, yet he's a fucking racist. So aren't you a tad concerned about your afterlife and where you're going to go with these problematic ideas?
And that's the part. I want to see somebody like really question him with some really hard questions that we're talking about. I want to see somebody ask him these things, because all the interviews are the exact same fucking questions over and over and over again. There's nothing new, no revolutionary discovery you're going to find with Christopher Langan. You can check out his CTMU and fall asleep on the first page.
For real.
Sorry, Ian, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it really is fucking boring, dude. Like, I told you guys, whenever I'm researching these, I really do like looking at the primary sources. But this is the one time where I was like, I can't do this. I literally cannot look at this page for a second more.
Well, you were saying this is some Zizian level shit.
That's exactly how I feel.
When researching their philosophy and, on everything and how they explain the universe and stuff. And you were saying this earlier to us. You're like, if he was younger, you feel like he would have potentially fell into the Zizian
100%. If he was more obsessed with pop culture instead of racism, he would have become a Zizian for sure.
I could see that. Because I think that like computer science part of his mind, that he fuses into everything, definitely would fit right in with the Zizians.
Well, and the Zizians think they're like so smart, so above average, and it's like, ooh, in with the clique. And I could see him being like, ooh, I'm only going to associate myself with these other brilliant minds.
But part of me is like, how authentic is that really for Chris? Part of me is like, does he even like believe this shit that he's saying, or
I think
does he just say it?
I think when you're that cocky and seemingly think so high of yourself, like there's got to be a part of you that has doubts, right? You got to be overcompensating for some sort of personal doubt you have, I would think.
I agree. I also think the fact that he's sought out like literally hundreds-year-old racist conspiracy theories shows me that he is somewhat like that's something he is dedicated to is the racism thing.
Oh, well, I don't got much more to say about Chris. I'll be honest with you. I'm pretty tired of even talking about him at this point. But I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Do you feel the same way that we do? Let's just say I hope so.
I really hope so, man.
But there it is. Chris Langan. Smarter than Einstein, baby. Mm-hmm. Clearly. But clearly missing the point of life and point of being a human at the end of the day. Very lost. I'll pray for him.
Pray for Chris.
Pray for Chris. But that's going to be it for us today. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hopefully you found this interesting. Maybe you hated it, and I'm sorry. Sorry if you did. This was definitely a pick of mine. I didn't know where it was going to lead, and it led a totally different place than I thought it was. So. But yeah, let us know your thoughts. We'll see you guys next week. Till then, keep on taking your mind a mile higher.